think that talking about money should make Taylor pretty popular. I want to welcome you again. To those of you in our studio audience, this is a little bit like Oprah. Some of you are actually here, and some of you are watching, and all of you can benefit. Those of you who are actually here at the break, you can look under your chairs and see if you want a car. But if not, you'll still learn how you can get money from the South Carolina campaign. As far as Alden, the executive director, mentioned, this is a major opportunity. There's an opportunity to make a difference with the youth in our state. And there's hardly anything more important than that. And so we appreciate, and so many of you came from outside of Columbia at a distance, shows a lot of motivation. We appreciate the connections you have with your kids, and that's going to be a very important ingredient for actual success, for actual outcomes. As Forrest also mentioned, the South Carolina campaign is accountable to its funders. That's a lot of money. $1.5 million is a lot of money. And everybody wants to see that that money is actually making a difference. And so that's what this process is about, is developing grants and contracts to make money make a difference. Now what the South Carolina campaign basically wants to know is the answer to the following questions. Okay? And you'll see these questions over and over again today. But I want you to just listen to these questions and see if they make sense to you. Why are you doing what you're doing? In other words, what are the needs that you're going to address? And why are they important? That sounds like a sensible question. Another one is, what do you expect to accomplish? What changes do you expect? What outcomes do you expect with the youth that you're working with? Another one is, how are you going to get there using best practices, evidence-based programs in particular? And why are you choosing the evidence-based program that you've chosen? Another question is, do you have the capacity, the ability, to put that program into place with quality? Another question is, how are you going to do it? When will it happen? Who's going to do it? Who needs to be trained? How many kids will you reach? Those kinds of things. Another question they want to know is, you may have had this great plan on paper. What did you actually implement? How many kids did you actually reach? Did you do that program with quality? Did you, what is called, implement with fidelity? Another question is, did you achieve what you set out to achieve? Did you get the outcomes you expected? And another question is, again, we're going to go over all of this, that's what today is about, but I want you to understand, if you can answer the questions I'm talking about with quality, that's what you need to get the grant from the South Carolina campaign. Now, when you look at your outcomes and see what you achieved and what you didn't achieve, you may have gotten some of them, but not others. Are there ways you can improve what you've done? Are there ways to what's called continuous quality improvement for you? And last but not least, what every funder that I know wants to know is about sustainability. What will you do? What kind of strategies do you have to sustain beyond this funding that you get from the South Carolina campaign? If you were successful, how are you going to keep this thing going? Do those questions make sense? Can you see why the campaign would like you to answer those and know those? I mean, that's what and if you can answer those well, that's what this is all about. And that's what this day is devoted to. So we're going to go over each of those, but that's what it's all about. So in addition, and Forrest mentioned this too, you know what's happening with budgets all over the state and all over the country. And you know that there are major, major calls for accountability. And you know that people are questioning, should we put money into this? Do we know that it works? And so if you learn to do the kinds of things we're talking about today, they're also likely to help you with other funders like United Way. How many of you try to get United Way funding or have United Way funding? This should help you with that. Okay? And last but not least, if you think this is a good fit, we encourage you to apply. As you heard, this is the kind of mechanism that we're planning to use for the future. And so even if you're not successful the first time in, you're going to get some feedback that can help you be successful next time. So it really makes sense to be here, to be out there where you are in South Carolina land, for those of you who are not physically here, and to think about this in terms of what it means and how you can use this currently to apply and how you can use it in the future. So now what I want to do is I want to give you some background to where these ideas come from. If we want you to answer these questions that I mentioned, where do these questions come from? Do they make sense? Did they just come out of a hat? Why are they important? And so we're going to give you a little bit of background. So what you'll be getting today is how to apply for funding, what is getting to outcomes contracting, which is this process that we're going to be talking about today that you'll use to apply for money. How is it developed? Where did it come from? Why is it important? And how do we know that it works? So among the things that I'm going to talk about is why evaluate? Why should we evaluate it at all? I'm going to talk about taking the mystery out of evaluation. We know that evaluation scares a lot of people. And we have been trying to develop ways that helps evaluation actually help you succeed. And that's part of what we talk about when we talk about taking the mystery out of evaluation. We also want to take the mystery out of that boogeyman word, accountability, and demystify, take the mystery out of accountability with this process called GTO, or Getting to Outcomes. How many of you have heard of GTO, Getting to Outcomes, prior to today? Raise your hands. Okay, how many of you haven't? Okay. Well, you will after today. All right, and last but not least, in fact, the major thing is how we use these ideas to develop what's called the GTO contract. All right, so why should we evaluate? I recently read something. How many of you have used the restrooms on this floor? Anybody use the restrooms on this floor yet? Okay, when you go to the faucet, you actually have to pull up the handle or move the handle to get water, right? When you go to an airport, do you do that, or do you just put your hands under? Put your hands under. So why do you think, which do you think is more hygienic? Putting your hands under. Well, according to this study, there's actually more germs in the ones that you put your hands under, which is a surprise to me and probably a surprise to everybody. So the idea of actually seeing whether things work or not is really important. And I want to share another personal experience. I have used those faucets, so that's personal. But I also want to share another personal experience that involves baboons, okay? And why we think it's important to evaluate. And why it's important to see whether the programs that we think are good are actually working. So on a trip to South Africa with my wife and son and his girlfriend, on our very first day, we went down to the Cape and we saw this baboon sitting on a sign. Well, that's not something you see every day in South Carolina. And I got excited and I wanted to take a picture. So I got out of the car to take this picture that you're seeing with this baboon on top. And the next thing you know, these two young baboons, if you can see them, have come into the back seat and they're going through the purse of my son's girlfriend. And all that they take are these prescription drugs. And they're the kinds of prescription drugs that you can sell on the market for whatever kinds of purposes. In any case, they run away and she's screaming, go get them, I need them. And we say, no way. And when we thought about this, we thought, what is this guy doing? He's kind of the distraction and the leader. He's the gang leader, and he's got these young juveniles that even if they get caught, they'll get a lesser sentence. They'll get off. So this is a mentoring program gone bad, okay? And there is evidence in the literature that not all mentoring programs work. And that's really among the things we're after is, are the programs that we're doing as we do them actually working, actually having the positive effects that we want? All right, so on a more positive perspective, how do we get to be excellent? How do we get to go from what we call oy vey? I did a presentation on this in Israel. You may have heard the expression oy vey. Heard that? Okay. Oy vey is what we just saw with the baboons. What we really want is outstanding. How do we move to achieving positive results? And so I asked the question, what do the following have in common? A champion fisherman, a super shrink. A super shrink is a really outstanding therapist, a really outstanding psychologist or psychiatrist, a great teacher, and Anne Frank. How many of you have read The Diary of Anne Frank? Raise your hands. Okay. What do they have in common? Anybody want to take a guess?
A.
What's that?
A.
A?
A.
I'm sorry.
A. The letter A.
Oh, A. You are good at details. You're going to do great on this application. They do have that in common. Anybody have an additional idea about what they have in common? Yes?
They fish into the mind.
Patience.
One more time?
Me?
Yeah.
They fish into the mind.
They fish into the mind. Okay.
They all get results.
They get results. Okay? And what do you think they do in order to get results? What they do is they have a quest for excellence, and they continue to do something that's called continuous quality improvement. They don't settle. You know, I'm a champion fisherman and I catch one fish at that contest. Am I going to settle for that? No, I'm going to have to do something different. And that's what the super shrink and the great teacher and even Anne Frank, it turns out, and I just found this out recently, that Anne Frank's diary that you have read, that's her third draft. That wasn't her first draft. She was writing because she hoped other people would see it. She wanted to be a professional writer, and she was writing because she hoped other people would see it. And she wanted to communicate well, and that was her third draft. So this idea of continuous quality improvement and a quest for excellence is something that I want us to keep in mind. To get a little bit more specific, there's an interesting article that came out in the Atlantic magazine about what makes a great teacher. And they talk about two African-American fifth graders who entered two different classes, and they both start off below standard. Okay? And 1 year later, one score rose 13 points, and the other stayed below standard, and they're trying to figure out what the difference is. And their backgrounds are the same, and they're saying it might be because of the teacher. And what makes a great teacher? Is it experience? Is it being a born performer? Is it charisma? Is it caring about kids? And they find that lots of teachers have those characteristics. Those are important. They're necessary. But they're not sufficient to really achieve excellence. What they find, and there's evidence in the Teach for America program that backs us up with actual statistics about which teachers do better in terms of school scores and which don't. And they find that the teachers who set big goals, who continuously look for ways to improve their effectiveness, who constantly evaluate and reevaluate what they're doing to see if it's working, and who avidly recruit students and parents into their process, who involve the students where they have a voice. And that's being considered more and more important these days as youth participation. They maintain focus. They plan exhaustively and purposefully for the next day or the year ahead. And they also think about what they want to reach. And they work relentlessly and refuse to surrender to the combined menaces of poverty, bureaucracy, and budget shortfalls. So you see that quest for excellence, that persistence, that always wanting to do better is a really important part of achieving important outcomes. And what they're also suggesting in that article, and this is important for you and your organizations, this is a quote: if school systems hired, trained, and rewarded teachers according to these principles, if that's the way we work as an organization, to plan, to work for excellence, to continuous quality improve, then the teachers wouldn't have to work so hard. They would operate in a system or a culture that's designed in a different way, that's designed for success. All right, so I think we've gone over this. The idea of reaching results, being excellent, involves setting big goals, continuously looking for ways to improve, involving students and parents in your process, being focused, doing good planning, working really, really hard. All right, so that leads us to something that we call empowerment evaluation. The idea is that evaluation can actually be your friend. Evaluation can actually help you succeed. And that's where the GTO, getting to outcome stuff, came from. So what I want to do is I want to take some of the mystery out of evaluation. I'm going to skip this. I guess we took out American Idol. Okay, American Idol. How many of you, don't pay attention to this cartoon. How many of you watch American Idol? Raise your hands. Okay. How many of you have voted in American Idol? Don't be embarrassed. It's okay. It's okay. Those of you, particularly those of you who have voted, know that there's a lot of evaluation going on in American Idol, right? Did that person, did that performer sing that song well? Was that song suited to their style? There are blogs, there are all kinds of information about that. And what I've been really interested in is that we actually love evaluation. If you watch American Idol, you're into evaluation, you're evaluating, and particularly if you vote, you're evaluating. And so what I'm interested in, what I want us all to think about, is that evaluation is actually a natural activity, and everybody in this room is an evaluator. And everybody that you know is an evaluator, and lots of times you like to evaluate. So I've wondered, why is evaluation so scary? Why isn't it a natural thing that we do in health and human services? And one of the things we've wanted to do and try to do is take the mystery out of evaluation. And so if you're not a professional evaluator, I'm going to tell you that in these next 4 slides, I'm going to give you the basics of evaluation. Now, it's not the same as taking a course at the Dartmouth School of Business or a course with me over a semester, but I'll give you some of the basic ideas of evaluation. And I'm going to do it with bows and arrows, okay? Scenario A, there's an outcome evaluation in which there's a big evaluation report. It comes in after the project's over, so there's nothing you can really do about it, and it says, you didn't get the outcomes you wanted to get. You didn't, all that time, all that work, all that sweat, and according to the evaluation, the outcomes aren't there. So what you see is the arrow's missing the target, there's a big fat evaluation report, and there's a guy crying at his desk. Okay? Anybody have that experience? Getting an evaluation that didn't come out so positive? Well, if you didn't, you're pretty lucky. Lots of people have that. Scenario B, the arrow hits the target. In this case, the high-risk youth is graduating from high school. Okay? That's what outcome evaluation is about. Did you reach the outcomes that you set for yourself? So one of the big things, or one of the questions you might be wondering is, why do we sometimes get scenario A, and why do we sometimes get scenario B? Well, one of the reasons we get scenario A is a version of what's been called shoot, aim, ready. We put a program into place before we're fully ready, before we fully aim, and the arrow misses the target. And an example of this in South Carolina, the true example, 3 weeks before school starts, it's summertime, 3 weeks before school starts, the school principal says to his guidance counselor, I know bullying is a bad idea, I know bullying leads to school absence, I know school absence leads to kids not doing so well on the tests, let's have an anti-bullying program. 3 weeks before school starts. So, school starts in 3 weeks, do you think there's a program in place? How many think yes? Okay, Some of you. There is a program in place. Is it a good program? No, not at all. You can't put a good quality program in place like that. Does this ever happen? Yeah. So what we really would prefer is a version of ready, aim, shoot. So in this one, there's planning, there's implementation, and the arrow comes pretty close, but it doesn't quite hit the target. So then we don't do the same thing again, because if we do the same thing again, we're likely not to hit the target again. So we try to figure out, we came close on this seemed to work, this didn't seem to work. You know, we're going to do some things that are different with parking, for example, next time we have a meeting, right? And so we're going to change our aim a little bit. We're going to change that. And that's called continuous quality improvement. What worked well, what didn't work well, and then we ready, aim, shoot, and hit the target. So in these 4 slides, I've tried to convey 3 major points. What's an outcome evaluation? What's called a process evaluation? This is a process evaluation, looking at how well the planning went, what was implemented, etc. And then continuous quality improvement. Those are major concepts for us, and those are major concepts that the campaign wants to know. What's your process going to be? Did you get outcomes? How can you keep on improving what you do? So that leads us to an area called empowerment evaluation, and that's an approach that I helped to develop that says that the knowledge and tools of evaluation can be used up front to plan better, to implement with quality, and to learn to self-evaluate. So just the way we're self-evaluating, or we're learning to evaluate when we do American Idol, or how many of you go to a USC or a Clemson football game? Raise your hands. Okay? You hear evaluation all the time. You're evaluating, right? When you hear cheers, you're evaluating. All right? So we know how to evaluate. And what we're going to do is share with you how you can do more of that for yourself so that you know whether things are working or not. All right, so the GTO contracting system, this approach we're talking about today, will work with you to help assure being ready, that you're aiming well, that you're shooting, and that you'll increase the chances of hitting your target. And that's what we care about, is getting those outcomes, hitting the target. So now we come to this scarier word called accountability. And I use the bows and arrows to try to take the mystery out of evaluation. Now I want to explain how we can understand accountability and not just think of it as something that's there to scare us or to bring fear, but actually why results-based accountability is a good thing, and also how you can achieve it. So when you're told to jump this high and you're down here and you don't know how to get up there, of course people will be afraid of that. And what we're doing in this getting to outcomes process and what's built into writing this proposal is by answering questions, you are able to have a ladder of how to achieve accountability. So accountability is the systematic inclusion of critical elements of planning, implementation, and evaluation, which we've kind of talked about already. And the way that we do it here in getting to outcomes is by answering 10 accountability questions. And as we've said, the reason why we want to do this is because the funders require it, but most importantly, the youth deserve it, because we want to make a difference. And I know that if you're motivated enough to drive a couple hours to get here on time, you're motivated to make a difference. It involves new partners to know their involvement, and that you want to know, because you're putting in time and energy. You're not just getting money, you're putting in time and energy. You want to know if this thing is working. So we have these 10 accountability questions that I kind of hinted at earlier on. The first question is, what are the needs and what are the resources that must be addressed to prevent teen pregnancy in your community? And you can be talking about your school or your Boys and Girls Club or whatever, but what are the needs that you're going to try to address? And what are the potential resources you have to meet those needs? The second question comes after the first. It says, once you know what the needs are and the resources are, then you set up your goals. What are you going to try to achieve? What are your desired outcomes? Once you've stated what your desired outcomes are, then the big questions are, how are you going to get there? What are you going to do to achieve those outcomes? And that's where we get to something called best practices or evidence-based programs, and this funding period is about 3 evidence-based programs. So which one are you going to choose? How do you decide which one you're going to choose? Which one of those 3? And an important part of that is something we call fit. How will these different programs that you're thinking about fit with your population and your goals and outcomes? Some programs may be a better fit than others. The next one is capacity. We've already talked a little bit about that. Having the capacity to do that program well. And if you don't, for example, currently have somebody who's trained in that program, that's clearly a capacity that you'll need to build, and the campaign will be providing training opportunities. The 6th question is, what's your plan? You've now figured out which one of these programs you're going to do and why. What's your plan for doing it? Who's going to do what, when, where, and how? 7 is, how well did you implement that program? How well did you implement your plan? The 8th one is, we went through all that work. Did it make a difference? Have our programs had the desired outcome? Did it lead to that outcome we set up in step 2? Number 9 is continuous quality improvement. So we can all learn things. And I guarantee you would have learned some things about parking. Okay? We can all learn things. So a lot of things we think we've done well today, but perhaps not everything was perfect. And that's likely to be true when you put a program into place. What that means is, don't do it, for the things that didn't work, don't do them the same way again. That just doesn't make sense. How can you improve what you're doing? And last but not least is sustainability. If this program is successful, if you're getting outcomes, what can you do to keep it going? Now, hopefully these questions make sense to you. And what we have found is that they can be used in lots of ways and for lots of things. So, as an example, we're going to talk about taking a vacation and seeing if we can use these questions. Okay? So this is a time to shout out. How many of you need a vacation? All right, how many of you don't need a vacation? Did you just have one?
Yes.
All right. All right. Well, that's good. But many of you do. All right. So how do you know you need a vacation? Shout out. And you have to shout loud. Okay.
Not as effective.
You're not as effective. What else? Burnt out.
Everyone needs rewards.
Everyone needs rewards. Great. Making mistakes, tired, anybody?
Anytime relief group.
Okay, so second is, now you know what your needs are. What are your goals for your vacation? What do you want to try to get out of your vacation? Relaxation.
Sleep. Fun.
Sleep. Fun. I'm glad we're not just having couch potatoes. How many of you like to go to a different culture or a different country or a different part of the U.S.? Okay. So that leads us to number 3, which is best practices. How do we decide where to go? Are any of you into sort of adventure kinds of things like skiing or hiking or something? What are you into?
Horseback riding.
Horseback riding. Does it make a difference where you ride? Okay.
Dr. Warren, can you go back to the podium real quick?
Sure.
They're asking it so they can't see you or hear you. So.
They keep saying they can't see you.
All right, well, let me put this on then.
Yeah, turn that on.
Okay, how's that? Can you hear me now? Is that, can you hear me now? This is AT&T, and I lost my signal.
Yeah, it works.
All right, so some other adventure things?
Golf.
Golf, all right. All right, so all golf courses are not the same, right? So let's say you're going to a different part of the country. How would you know what's a good course?
Reviews and research.
Okay, reviews, internet, research. All right, in terms of going to other countries, has anybody gone to another country lately? Where have you gone?
Lately?
Yeah, all right.
Mexico.
Where?
Mexico.
Okay. So how did you know where to go?
Talking to people, internet.
Okay, great. And I like to use Fromer's guides when I go. I find them really trustworthy. So that's kind of like a best practice, right? Like an evidence-based thing. I think Fromer's is evidence-based. Those people have gone there. They've told me that it worked. This was a good restaurant, good for the money, all that kind of stuff.